So here's what I want to do today. We're talking about web usability. What I want to do is give you greater reasons to care about it and show you that you really ought to care about it and you ought to care greatly about it, and then show you how to do it. Because I go around and what I see is in the Christian arena is tons of churches and organizations on fire to make a large impact for the gospel, which is fantastic. And their websites, however, are sometimes undermining their ability to make the impact that they could possibly make. And it's not coming from any bad intentions or anything like that. It comes simply from not knowing some basic principles of usability, of how to make your site usable. So you need to know that you need to make your site usable, and you need to know how to do it. And fortunately, it's not that hard to do it. It boils down to just a few core principles that I'm going to be talking about here, and hopefully you can go away from this session knowing what makes a site usable and being able to analyze a site and know even what needs to change in order to make it more usable so that you can do that on your sites. But first I want to give you a better reason to care about usability, show you why it matters at all. So we have the practical case, first of all. Why does usability matter? So the practical case is simple. Our environment is complex enough. I've always tried to battle against chaos. So I was at the San Francisco Museum of Art a few months ago because I like that place, and whenever I'm in an interesting city, I'll try and do some interesting things. I like going to art museums. And the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art is fantastic. It's just an exciting place to be. And they had a display on good design there. And it was neat. And they just had 10 principles up on the wall, and I took a picture of each of the principles, and I won't go through all of them, but this was one of the points that was on the wall, and he's exactly right. Our environment is complex enough. We've been seeing stats about information overload and the amount of content on the web, and within a year it's supposed to double every 72 hours, which is just astonishing. We have a complex environment. Don't make it more complicated for people. If your site is hard to use, people are going to be frustrated with it, and they're going to leave. It's that simple. They have other places to go. They have lots of things to do. They have things to do in their regular lives, things with their kids, things at work. They've got other websites they can go to. If your site is hard to use, they're going to use it less. My wife made a comment recently about a Christian site. She said, yeah, I went there because I had to do something, and I never went back, and I never want to go back. And it's not because it was a bad site. It has excellent content, and it's seeking to do a lot of good things. The reason she doesn't want to go back is because of how hard to use it is. So this is a big deal because my wife has good intentions. She wants to serve God, advance the gospel, and grow in her faith. And this site wants to help her with those things, and she doesn't want to go use it. It's because, here's one way to put it, systems trump intentions. So you can have great intentions for your site, but if you don't design it in a way that aligns with how people actually use the web, your good intentions are going to be frustrated. Likewise, the user can have good intentions to come to your site and grow spiritually, but if it's not designed in a way that accords with how users actually operate, they're not going to use it much, and they're not going to benefit from it, even if they want to. So this is a key principle of usability we'll talk about. You have to design for the user how users actually act, not how you think they should act. Key principle there. How they actually act, not how you want them to act. Know how they use the web and align with that. Instead of saying, well, we want them to use it this way, and boy, they should do it this way because this is so important, so they should be glad about it being this way, and so we're going to do it anyway. Bad attitude. Don't have that attitude. Know how they actually operate. Now, there is an element of leadership involved here, and I'm going to talk about that, where ultimately beneath being user-centered is the need to be content-centered, but we're focusing on user-centeredness. I will show you how that relates. If your site isn't usable, it diminishes your brand and the effectiveness of your content and site in general. So it diminishes your brand. For example, the situation with my wife, the brand of that site that she doesn't want to go back to is now diminished in her eyes. She knows it has great content, but she doesn't respect it, esteem it as she would, because it's hard to use. So she's not going to be telling other people to go there. So the site, and you multiply that by thousands of people, by tens of thousands of people, usability has a huge, massive impact. Massive impact. So I was in Australia a few months ago doing some consulting for a web client, and while I was over there, I was like, this is cool. I went to some museums there too. And I had to rent a car. You got to drive on the wrong side of the street over there. It's just really funny. And there's rules. You can't touch your iPhone. You get docked points. I don't know how they know if you touch your iPhone. But there's also speed cameras all over the place. And I didn't know this. And over here in the US, we're accustomed to driving 10 miles an hour over, typically 5-10 miles an hour. It's just the way, it's okay to do that. It's the way to do it. So I get over there and that's what I'm doing. And I'm like, man, everyone is going so slow. What is up with this? And I had to drive about 10 or 15 miles to the hotel, 15 more miles the next day to the church. And I get there and I'm like, everyone just drives so slow. And they say, it's because of the speed cameras. They're all over the place. And so we found out I probably got 10 tickets on the way to the church that morning. So know the rules before you go places. But then I took a drive along the coast in order to, I've always wanted to go to Australia, and it's a beautiful place. And I was driving along the coast, and you're driving on the wrong side, and I wanted to take a picture while I was driving. I shouldn't even say this on the video. Stupid idea. I mean, I wanted to get the picture. It was worth it. But I ended up hitting the guardrail, and this is what happened. And I had insurance, fortunately, but the wheel was pretty bad too. So just like I diminished the value of this vehicle, still worked, but I diminished the value of it. Bad usability diminishes the value of your brand. And they got this fixed, fortunately, and the car worked for me the rest of the time. Likewise, making your site usable increases its effectiveness. This is Melbourne, where I was. Beautiful city, usable, walkway, notice. There's not obstacles in the way. It's just clear. Okay, your site should be like that. You don't want people off on the side throwing stuff at you. That's not good. It has an impact. When we released the major redesign of the Desiring God site to improve usability in 2006, that was the major purpose of the redesign, was to make the site more usable. We had all this content, and it's John Piper, and his stuff is fantastic, super helpful, biblical. But the site wasn't very usable. So the aim of the redesign was make it more usable. So we researched how to make websites usable. We've had to learn it all ourselves. It was tough. It was tough sledding, but we got it figured out. And that was the purpose of the site. And when we released the site on the basis of sound usability principles I'm going to be sharing with you today, within 4 months, visits increased 99%, page views increased 356%, and audio listens increased 359%. So making your site usable has a massive, concrete, tangible impact. And this was a turning point for our ministry. Usability matters. The thing is, and this is getting into the second part of the presentation, but as Christians and just organizations in general, everyone will agree pretty much that usability matters. But the thing is, nobody knows how to do it, or few people know how to do it well. And that's the thing. You can't just have intentions. I'm going to make the site usable. You need to know the principles of how to do it. They're not always obvious. They make sense in retrospect. You're like, yeah, of course. But you can't just sit down and say, I'm going to make my site usable and do it. You don't know how, unless you've actually learned about usability. So that's the key. It's not enough to say, yeah, I want to make my site usable. You got to know the principles, and you need to follow them. And when you break them, you got to do it on purpose. It's okay sometimes to break the principles. Just do it on purpose and know what's going to happen. Know what you're giving up. Know what the trade-off is when you break the principles. You do need to make an emotional connection with your users. So a good friend of mine at Desiring God, when we released the site, he said, yeah, this is super usable, but I want there to be more of an experience. And that's fantastic. That's a great point. But what happens a lot of times is people sacrifice usability for a good experience. A good experience is important. People are emotional as well as rational. You don't want a merely functional site. So Jacob Nielsen's site, I haven't been there in a while. He's the usability guru. But his website It's usable, but the design is horrible. And people continually offer to redesign a site for him for free. And he says, no, 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 no. And it's weird. The site is easy to use, but it doesn't connect emotionally with people because he's leaving the good design part out of it. And we need to do both. We need to connect emotionally with people as well as functionally. There's nothing worse than something that is merely functional. I hate it. And of course, this is why Apple does such a good job. They're connecting emotionally with people. We need to do that as well. We're not being holistic. And if we're merely practical, even in our lives, like if you don't want to spend money on your family, if you're like, oh, let's just do enough to get by. Horrible, horrible. Because you're treating people as merely utilitarian beings who are only here to survive and only have rational capabilities, not also emotional needs and concerns. God is a God of beauty. We need to connect emotionally with people. That's a different talk, but don't sacrifice usability to do it. Good design makes product useful. This is great. This is also from the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. A product is bought to be used. It has to satisfy certain criteria, not only functional, but also psychological and aesthetic. Good design emphasizes the usefulness of a product while disregarding anything that could possibly detract from it. And here's what I like about this. It combines the emotional and functional components in good design. It needs to be useful and it needs to be not only functional, but also psychological and aesthetic. You need to do both. You need to have both. Good design has both. So that's the practical case, but there is also a biblical case, and this is even more important. The practical case can just be summed up by saying, hey, look, your site's going to do a lot better if you make it usable. No debate about that. And a lot better. Like at Desiring God, quadrupled what we were doing, okay? It's a big deal. You got to do it. But there's even better reasons. The reasons that I never see anyone talk about, and they're awesome. Super cool and fascinating and helpful. They come from the biblical case for usability. And here's my argument. Making your site easy to use is a matter of loving your neighbor as yourself. We are commanded to do this. Does anyone disagree? And no one disagrees. This is the Christian ethic, the standard Christian ethic, okay? And it's shot through Jesus' teaching. Jesus' teaching is shot through with it. So the end of the Sermon on the Mount, he sums it up saying, so whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. That's just another way of stating the second part of the Great Commandment. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. These are saying the same things. Love your neighbor as yourself. How do you do that? Do unto them as you would have others do unto you. Here's what we do with this, though. We take this and we reduce it down. We turn it into the mere avoidance ethic. It's freakish the way we do this as Christians. So we think this, we just reduce it down and to think it means avoid bad. Avoid doing bad things. Don't be mean to people. Don't watch trashy movies. Don't steal. Don't do this. Don't do that. Which is great, fundamental, and important. But notice Jesus is saying more. He's saying we are to be proactive in doing good for people. He's not giving us the avoidance ethic here. He's giving us the proactive ethic. Be on the lookout for doing good. Because that's how we treat ourselves. We anticipate our own needs. For example, like I don't wait until my car runs out of gas to fill it up. I see where the gauge is, and I will go and fill it up in advance. But sometimes, like when it comes to helping the poor, for example, we have this notion, well, let's wait till they're in dire circumstances before we help someone. Or wait until they ask. That's weird. That's not how we treat ourselves. We create systems so we have ongoing income so we don't get to a point of great need. We are to treat others that way too. We minister to our own needs, the full range of our own needs. If I'm thirsty, I don't say, I better read the Bible first. Maybe I'll get a drink 3 days from now because the spiritual side of things is so much more important. And the spiritual side is more foundational, but we don't deal with this dichotomy in our own lives between meeting physical needs and meeting spiritual needs. We realize we need to address both. And sometimes some are more strategic than others, but same with treating others. We are to be proactive in doing good for people, and this is how Christians are. So Jonathan Edwards says this the best. There is another that has made you and preserves you and provides for you, and on whom you are dependent. So another has made you. You're not your own. And he has made you for himself and for the good of your fellow creatures, not only for yourself. He has placed before you higher and nobler ends than self, even the welfare of your fellow men and of society and the interests of his kingdom. And for these you ought to labor and live, not only in time, but in eternity. So here's the thing. Most of the time, when organizations think about usability, their motive is, this is going to make our site more effective. And it stops there. And that's great. It's true. It's important. You want your site to be effective. But our motive is higher than that. We want to serve our users. We want to do them good. We want to make life better for them. That's our motive. So it's not just self-interest, which is legitimate. It's beyond. It's self-transcendence. It's caring about others and the advancement of God's kingdom. That's our ultimate motive in making our sites usable and in doing everything. So our mindset as Christians every day, and William Wilberforce says this really well. He was the great abolitionist in the 18th century. And he said that the fundamental principle of the Christian life is that we are not our own. That's exactly right. So we don't look to ourselves for how we are to live. We look to God for how we are to live. And he, as Edwards says, has placed us higher ends than ourself. Don't just be about your self-interest. Be about the good of others and the advancement of his kingdom. That is the Christian ethic. I love how Wesley says it, and Wesley was an Arminian, Edwards was a Calvinist. They both agree totally on this. Do all the good you can to all the people you can at all the times you can, as long as you ever can. But what we do with that is it's weird. We think it means go to the nursing home on Sunday afternoons after church. So once a week you go do something good. Or help an elderly woman across the street when you come across it. And we think that we do this maybe once a week, once a month. I get to do something good, like a Cub Scout. Make your bed, that's a good deed. And false. This applies in every realm of life. The primary arena in which you do good is your vocations. So if you're in charge of the website of your ministry or your church, the chief avenue through which you carry this out is through doing your work of making that website run well for people. And being proactive and on the lookout for ways to make it better for people. That's one of the chief ways you do good to people. Now you also help an elderly woman across the street. Go visit nursing homes on Sunday. Go to Africa. Do all of that. It's fantastic. But remember, this also applies right where you are at. And what a fantastic opportunity we have, because we can be doing good literally all day long, every day long. Every day long. That's not even a phrase. Do all the good you can in your vocations. And I'm saying this applies to your websites. Any objections, though? Anybody disagree with this? I like objections. I like hard questions. And at the end, I want you to ask me your most difficult questions. And they can be about anything. You can ask about the problem of evil, evidence for the inspiration of the Bible. I don't care. Anything. No objections here. This is basic. We all agree with this. But we don't tend to do it. Some people actually do disagree. Nobody in this room. But it's fun to talk about. This applies to all areas of life. So at that dorm where we're staying, which has some usability problems, but it's okay. It's okay because that's the way it is. It doesn't come from lack of work, lack of concern. But notice, okay, so there's this plaque on the wall quoting what Jesus says at the end of the parable of the Good Samaritan. Jesus says to him, you go and do likewise. He meant that. So call me crazy when Jesus said, go love your neighbor as yourself. I think he meant we should go love our neighbors as ourselves. And you do it out in everyday life. And that's what that plaque is trying to say. Non-believers actually end up doing this well and applying it sometimes. So here's back to the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. A product must not claim features more innovative, more efficient, of higher value that it does not have. It must not influence or manipulate buyers and users. This is applying the ethic of honesty to product design. And again, it's weird. Sometimes when we think of ethics, we think boring. Just work hard and be honest. But it's actually exciting to apply a robust ethic to business, to ministry, to churches, because it comes out in very amazing counterintuitive ways. It means, for example, don't claim features you don't have, which means you got to make an excellent product because you got to back up your claims. So the ethic of honesty leads to creativity because you need to actually deliver on what you're claiming. You can't settle to make claims and then, the product doesn't actually do it. That's exciting. That's exciting. Paul, okay, so we need to love people in our vocations, not just Sunday after church. So take the Apostle Paul. He wasn't loving to the churches he planted, but a jerk when he was making tents. That's what he did a lot of times for income. He wasn't a jerk to those people. He was kind to them. He sought to love his neighbor as himself. And his tents didn't leak. He didn't make shoddy tents. We're not to make shoddy websites. And I bet if he had a problem figuring out how to make a certain design of tent work well for people, he went and learned what he needed to know. And a lot of times we don't do that. We just stop. We give up. We don't learn what we need to do. 1 Corinthians 16:14, let all that you do be done in love. That includes your websites. See that no one repays anyone evil for evil, but always seek to do good to one another and to all men. We are to always seek to do good, not 50% of the time. So this applies in our jobs, in our work. Always seek to do good for people, which means see all of your work as a service to others and do it from that motive. So get excited, not just about cool technology and tools, which are great. Get excited about doing good for people and being proactive and creative and inventive and coming up ways to make things better for people and more exciting and interesting for people. That's an exciting life, and that's the Christian ethic. And that applies to your websites. Websites are not an exception to that. And the chief application of that here, though not the only one, is you need to make your websites usable. It's a matter of loving your neighbor as yourself. We don't seek to make our lives harder for ourselves. We seek to make them easier. So even at the dorm where I'm staying, there's one towel, I think, for the whole a week or whatever, which is great. Totally fine with that. But I don't say to myself, well, just put up with it. We should just use wet towels every day.
You can get more towels.
You can get more towels, okay. Now, I actually wasn't planning on getting more towels because I'm just happy to be staying here. I can use this all week. But I'm not doing that out of some principle, making life harder on myself. It's out of desire to serve and do well for others, and this is what we have, let's deal with it. When we have the opportunity to do good for ourselves, we do. And we should be like that with our websites, and that means making them easier to use. This is about being loving people in how we build our websites. I would argue at some point a hard-to-use website is a failure of love. Sometimes it's just because you don't know any better, you did your best. And God accepts that. He absolutely does. But at some point, someone needs to come along, like me, and say, you're doing your best. You need to add knowledge to that. And now you need to exert effort in figuring out how to be better at doing your best so you can serve people better. Sometimes bad websites, bad usability is literally a lack of love, a lack of concern to people because it comes from laziness. Not being diligent to learn how to make your site easy to use. We are to take pains to make our sites usable because we are to take pains in serving people. This is steak, not broccoli. It's super exciting. Titus 2:14, Paul says that Jesus gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and purify for himself a people for his own possession, zealous for good works. We're to be zealous, fanatical for good works. And your job is an incredible opportunity for doing that. It's one of the primary avenues in which you do good works. The Christian ethic is hazardous liberality, going the extra mile for people, coming up with ways to be creative, inventive, stylish in the way we do things because it serves people better, and laying ourselves out, spending ourselves for the good of others. So, in conclusion, don't be the pink slime of websites. Is everyone familiar with pink slime? And okay, so this is the weirdest thing. Okay, so I don't like spam. Okay, this spam is my arch enemy. Like even in 8th grade, I would people would try and get me to eat spam. And I hate spam. Hot dogs, I've not eaten a hot dog, I think, in 25 years because I found out what was in them a long time ago. It's like I don't eat hot dogs, don't like spam. Okay, so this controversy about pink slime comes out. And BPI, the Beef Products Incorporated, which is from Iowa, where I'm from. So them and the governor even of Iowa and other people are saying, look, pink slime, it doesn't hurt you. It's healthy, it's wholesome, it even has some nutritional value. So they're saying it's okay that it's in ground beef because it doesn't hurt you. By the way, so pink slime, they take the leftovers of the meat that used to go into dog food. It used to only go into dog food, okay? They figured out a way to get fat out of it, get the E. coli out using ammonia. That's not my big concern about it. I don't care. I know that's probably not harmful to spray meat with ammonia, but it is weird. So they figure out how to take the scraps that are fit only for dog food and put it in your meat to save money for themselves. So the meat's cheaper. Like, I don't care. I don't care if it's 25 cents cheaper per pound. I don't want to eat that stuff because it consists of ligaments and connective tissues and things like that are in it, okay? That's gross. So anyway, but what people we're saying is it doesn't hurt you and it has nutritional value, so who cares? And like, I want to say, it's gross. Isn't that enough? Like if I go to a restaurant and I order a sirloin, and I order a porterhouse and they bring me a sirloin, and I say to them, sorry, I ordered a porterhouse. They don't say to me, well, sirloin is safe to eat. It's wholesome. Lots of people like sirloin, so just put up with it. That'd be ridiculous. No one would go back there. They would bring me the porterhouse that I ordered. So also with pink slime. Look, the problem is not that it hurts people. I'm not afraid of being hurt by eating pink slime, not at all. I just think it's gross and I don't want to eat it. It's that simple. So with your website, don't just have the ethic, doesn't do any harm. Sure, okay. Make it great though. Make it be the porterhouse of websites. Or what's my favorite kind of steak? I forget again. Ribeye. Ribeyes are awesome. Yeah, they're good. Don't be pink slime. Okay? This is the practical case for usability, and it's about more than just convincing you that it matters. I wouldn't spend 20 minutes on it if I was just trying to convince you it matters. It's about changing your whole mindset, about how you go about your website, and not just your website, but your whole life. Your whole life. The way you treat your family, the way you treat everybody. Does this make sense? Okay. Any questions? I'm not going to go into this, but you know how we are supposed to, the gospel, we're to testify it with words. That's the only way people understand the gospel. But we're to also support it by our actions. Having a usable website is one way of supporting your testimony to the gospel because it shows you love people. If you're doing it from the motive of love. So Christians should be known not just for what they say, believe in Jesus, but for their love for others, being diligent in doing good for others. And that needs to be manifest. We have an opportunity to manifest that in our websites. We have an opportunity to show the church and the world that we love them by making our sites easy to use and effective. Okay, the priority of usability, this is real quick. This is where most people make the mistake. They say, yeah, usability is important. It's priority 3. First of all, we want to give people a good experience. That's goal number 1. So like Chipotle used to have this talking burrito that would come up. I think they got rid of this. You go to their site, a talking burrito comes up. Like, I don't want the burrito, I want to know the menu. I don't want an experience. I'm not coming here to be entertained. Well, I should state that a little bit differently. Experience is great. We are in the experience economy and going beyond to the transforming economy here. Transformational economy. And that's fantastic. But you don't create experiences that make things harder for people. That's the problem. So this talking burrito, bad. Like, get out of my way. You are a hindrance to me. Or like that Clippy that Microsoft used to have, the clip art, creates an experience but annoys you to death, okay? So this is what happens when the priority becomes give people cool stuff. Give them an experience. That is important to give them experience, but usability comes first. You need to do it in a way that doesn't sacrifice usability. Usability should therefore be prioritized above looks. So when we did the Designer God website, we said if we ever have to make a choice between what looks good and what's usable, we choose what's usable. That's the way it's got to be. And usability should be prioritized above cool functionality. It comes before functionality, not after. So back in the day, Flash used to be really popular, like Flash navigation, and it created an experience, but it was super hard to use and annoying. What the designers were doing wrong is they were prioritizing cool functionality above the usefulness of the site. Mistake. Got to flip that around. If you make usability the top priority, still do cool stuff, but it needs to go within that grid, being consistent with the site actually being easy to use. So this all leads to how do we actually make our site usable? And this is where most good intentions break down, because we haven't educated ourselves on what actually makes a site usable. And everybody can know this. Everybody can know this. It just comes down to a few basic things, and that's what I'm doing. I'm boiling it down to you for the most important things. So a lot of times I will analyze websites, point out usability flaws, do a usability review, and I create information architecture for websites. And I've read 25 books on this. I've done it in the detail, been in the weeds, and I have 5 things in my head when I'm doing it. That's it. 5 things get me 90% of the way. And then the other 10%, the experience I have and stuff, I'm able to bring to mind some secondary stuff and all that stuff. But just knowing five things gets you a long way, and knowing how to apply them. The core principle is where it starts. Really, you just need to know one thing. It's not even 5. I will show you 5 things, but they all come from this. You just need to know one thing. You only need to come out of this presentation knowing one thing. Okay, so how many things do you need to know when you come out of this presentation? 1. Did anybody say 2? Okay. Or 5? Just one thing. So does it seem hard to learn about usability? Just one thing you got to know. This is not calculus. And here's the principle. Don't make people think. Okay, what's that say? Don't make people think. Okay. So, already a quiz. What's the core principle? Don't make people think. Okay, so the core principle is make people think. Is that the principle? No. The core principle is make your site look really cool. Is that the core principle? No. The core principle is make a lot of money from your site. Is that? No. The core principle is don't make people think. Am I being anti-intellectual?
No.
No, why not?
People get confused, they make mistakes, they're lazy. And I found it also impossible, don't make them type anything.
That's a great point. Yeah. People have a lot going on. You want them thinking about your content, not about how to use your site. Yes, you want them to think hard, but about the content of the site, not about how to use it. If you make them have to think hard about how to use your site, you are the one being anti-intellectual, because you're putting up a barrier between the person and your content. So we're going to look at some examples of bad usability first. First, let me just elaborate a little more on this. Don't make people think. Here's what it means. And Steve Krug, I get this from Steve Krug. He wrote the best book on usability. It's easy to read. It's usable. It's awesome. It's short, about 160 pages or so. And you only even need to read the first half, because the second half is on user testing, which is good and helpful. But the main stuff you need to know is right in the first half. So get that book and read it. And it's called Don't Make Me Think. a common sense approach to web usability. And the way he describes the principle is someone comes to your site and immediately it's obvious to them what the site is. Oh, this is a blank. And here I can do this and this and this. And then when they're on a page, they know what to do and how to do it. They don't have to hunt around to try and figure things out, guess, experiment, feel their way through. It's obvious how to do the things they need to do, as obvious as possible. What you want to do is be minimizing question marks. The more question marks that there are in the user's mind, the less usable your site is. You're making them think. That's what question marks do. So your goal is minimize question marks, eliminate question marks. Anywhere you see a question mark that's going to arise in a user's mind, you want to eliminate it. Eliminate question marks. And it adds up. Sometimes you can say, oh, you know, but look, they'll get it figured out. It's only going to take a second. Look, that adds up. And there's 5 things on your site on a certain page that take a second to figure out. It ends up taking a toll on people and being taxing on people. This matters. Minimize the question marks. Okay, bad usability in life. I don't have a solution to this. Airport security. So like, I come and I've got everything reduced down to just one thing, because this is one way we make things easier. Take many things, reduce them down to a few things. So you put things in a shopping cart, or you put your stuff in your luggage, and I always carry on, because a checked bag is a lost bag. So everything's in, and I have my briefcase attached, and then I got to take things out and expand things from like one thing to like 1,000. I got to take my shoes off. So there's more. I got to take my iPhone out. Now you got to take your wallet out because of these body scanners things. You got to take your laptop out. You got to take your liquids out. And then fortunately there's bins, but like now I've gone from just carrying one thing to I've got 2 bins, 1, 2, and then my briefcase, and then my carry-on, 4 things, and then me, 5. So I go from one thing, me holding the carry-on, to 5 things. It's a pain in the neck. Now I don't have a good solution to it other than like, I'm not sure this is really necessary. But here's something in the cafeteria. Has anyone ate at the cafeteria here? So I remember this in college. Why are the cups so small? Like, this does not make sense. People drink more than that. So a cup this big, so by giving small cups, people have to go back more frequently to get more to drink. So give them a big cup. And now this is why usability often gets sacrificed. Someone says, if we give them big cups, our expense for soda is going to go up.
And they're likely to spill.
And they're likely to spill. So for their good and for our good, let's give them small cups. That's called the parental mindset. You're not parents. It's also called the protectionist mindset. It's putting the organization first. The priorities are mixed up. The priorities are mixed up. The priority needs to be first what serves the user, not the organization. So if they say our soda cost is going to go up, they need to say, oh, but who cares? Because it will serve the user better. User comes first, not the organization. A lot of organizations have an organization first mentality. It's about protecting themselves, conserving their money, being efficient, rather than creating a great experience for people and serving people and putting them first. So when I was at Desiring God, I used to say, we don't exist to exist. So many ministries would say, like when we were going to put everything online for free, like, how are you going to make money? Like, I don't care. This is the right thing to do. We exist to serve the church. That's our first priority, not thinking about ourselves. This is the Christian ethic, and this is where it gets radical, because people come and say, you're going to go out of business. You need money to survive, and of course you do. But here's the thing. That doesn't mean you make money the first priority. So, and this is where it gets reversed. So some people would say to us when we were in radio, putting John Piper on the radio, they'd say, no money, no mission. And the meaning of that was, get your financial house in order, do what it takes to be secure financially, and then you can carry out your mission. And then you can carry out your mission. Problem is, what that does is it ends up compromising your mission. Because instead of doing things that are going to serve people and excite people, which causes them to talk and spread the message, you give them small cups. Now, I'm not picking on Biola here. I mean, they might have some reason for this. I mean, maybe that's all that was available. I don't care. I'm not saying they don't like people by doing this. I just go around. I take pictures of bad usability whenever I see it, and good usability too. And I'll have another example from Biola. I just take pictures of this. So nothing personal, and so okay, it makes sense. But this is the thinking that happens so often in ministry. I'm not saying it happened here with these cups, but it illustrates what we so often came up against in ministry. And here's the thing. Okay, so money is important and you got to pay your bills. Here's the thing. You'll actually have more money if you put the user first rather than your organization first. Jim Collins talks about this. Actually, the Bible bears this out, but also so does actually business thinking and research. So Jim Collins, in his excellent book, Built to Last, has a chapter called More Than Profit. And he shows that the organizations that say we don't exist first to make a profit, we exist first to make a contribution, are actually more profitable than the organizations that say, look, we're here to make a profit, otherwise we can't exist, so that's our first priority, and then after that, yeah, whatever good happens is great. Those are the organizations that are actually less profitable. You're more profitable by putting others first. I'm not saying be reckless. I am saying have a hazardous liberality. I think that's the biblical ethic. I'm not saying be stupid. I'm not saying that. But I am saying don't have the self-protective ethic. Have the proactive for good ethic. The question's not first what will serve the organization and save us money. It's what will do good for people. So get larger cups for people so they don't have to make so many trips. And of course, my solution is I get 2 cups. And now they got to do more dishes. So, and this is the thing, it usually backfires. The organization first mentality often backfires. Again, I'm not saying that was the motive here, but a lot of times it is in things, and it backfires. Don't have it. More bad usability. This is just weird. So it goes to labeling. It's called muscle milk. And if you look close, right underneath it, it says contains no milk. I don't get that. I guess they do get some points for usability for telling us it contains no milk, because otherwise I would think there's milk in it, because it's called milk. Okay, a little bit of conflict there, but at least they did become clear. Okay, at Kinko's, if you go there to make copies, so I have to go to, or print stuff. I have to go print my book because it's so long and I have to get my mind around it. I have to print it. And you go there and you're able to put your USB drive and your credit card in, and you go through this sequence. Before it starts printing, you get to this screen, and you can't see it very well, but it says done. There's a check mark, and you can hit done on there. So you think, it's done, I should hit done, but if you hit done, it won't print your stuff. So they have this sign beneath saying, don't hit done until things are done printing. Okay, usability fail, right there. Okay, design the interface different. Make it say here, order received, we are printing it. Maybe have a progress bar or something. Have the done come up when it's actually done printing. Okay, just think through these things. Good usability. So here at Biola, vending machine that takes credit cards. I've never seen that before. It's awesome. They are getting my business. So when I'm thirsty, I don't carry cash around with me usually. When I do, I don't have ones. It's and it goes away. Most people don't have a lot of cash on them these days. They have credit cards. Vending machines, taking credit cards, awesome. It makes them useful again. I wasn't able to use them before. Now when I go, I'll buy 2 or 3 things at once because I want to be ready. So a bottle of Coke Zero and a bottle of water. And it's awesome. And so I'm actually buying more. It serves me more. They're actually making more money. And this one, this is weird. I forget where I was. Some building, and I come across, it's freaky because you're walking along and there's these doors that say danger elevator pit. So apparently if the door is open, you fall into a pit. But they've labeled it well. But I'm like, this is weird because why is there an elevator pit there? And why is there the risk of falling down? Good usability that you can do, you should always be on the lookout to make life better for people and more usable for people, not just in your websites, but in everyday life. So for example, restrooms. The goal, here's the one principle for good design of a public restroom, make it so no one has to touch anything. That's the principle. So no one has to touch anything. Okay, now, here's what you can do if you're not designing restrooms, but after you wash your hands, if there's a paper towel dispenser like this where you need to touch it, so you just wash your hands, now you got to touch something with germs, unless after you touch that, get the paper towels, take them off, now your hands are dry, and then you got a paper towel in your hand and you can use it to bring more paper towel out so that the next person doesn't have to touch this, but they can grab this off and then get more paper towels without having to touch that thing. Small, simple thing, but it's easy to do. Like it takes like half a second after you're done. Just thinking of very simple ways when you come across things to make things easier for people. Think of others proactively. Okay, good usability manifests itself in 5 main principles. So don't make people think. Expresses itself in 5 main principles. The first principle, provide good orientation. Nobody likes to be lost. Sometimes it can be fun for a while, if you're into orienteering or that sort of thing. But when I go to Home Depot, I don't want to be lost. I want to know where things are. I want good orientation. Nobody likes to be lost. And this is the #1 problem on the web. People come to your site from all over the place and they enter, not just at the home page, but at any page. There's lack of orientation unless you provide it for people. This is the first thing you need to do to keep people from thinking. You provide good orientation through 3 main things. First, site ID and tagline. Okay? Now, this tends to happen automatically. It's become a convention. It's been a convention for years, but a lot of times, like, we don't realize that we're doing it. So the site ID goes in the upper left. Following web conventions is an important usability principle, by the way. I don't talk about it in here, but because people have an expectation of how things are going to work, and if you conform to those, they don't have to think to figure out how your site works. If you differ from them, now they got to learn something new. And like we go to hundreds of web pages a day, I think, probably. Like when I look at my history, it's like, and so if you're having to learn a new approach, even half the time when you go to a site, that's a big cognitive workload. So follow web conventions, and one of them is the site ID goes in the upper left, not like the bottom. That would be weird, don't do it upper left. And then you need to have a tagline so people know what your site is. That's what a tagline does. True Woman, or Revive Our Hearts, does a good job with their tagline, calling women to freedom, fullness, and fruitfulness in Christ. You might have never heard of them before. You go there, you know what they do. You know what the site does because of the tagline. It's descriptive. Now note, a tagline is not a motto. So there's a difference. So bad tagline, we bring good things to life. So that's GE's motto. And I don't know if they use it as a tagline, probably not. But if they did, that would be a bad tagline because you don't know what that means. It might be inspirational if you know what it means, and they can say, we exist to bring good things to life. And that's great. But on their website as a tagline, that would be bad because what does that mean again? It's not self-evident what it means. Good tagline at the Desiring God website. This is just what came to my mind first. God-centered resources from the ministry of John Piper. So, you know, it's about the resources from some guy named John Piper. You're going to get resources here. Oh, and there's something unique about the resources. They're God-centered. Okay, got it. Or True Woman's tagline, calling women to freedom, fullness, and fruitfulness in Christ, or Revive Our Hearts. You know what you're going to get. So that's the first thing to orient people. Second, you need to provide good global navigation. There are 2 components to the navigation you need to provide. And the navigation is the biggest thing for orienting people. It is the biggest thing. It provides like a map for people. And you do it through 2 things. So you see across the top up there, that's the global navigation, the main sections of the site. This is Target. Women, men, baby. By the way, everyone knows who Target is. Target doesn't need to have a tagline. There's exceptions. Everybody knows Target. But probably with most of our ministries, like we're not as well known as Target. But so anyway, global navigation is the main sections of the site. And it's across the top. I think that's the best place for it. I've never seen it work super well otherwise. But it's the main sections of the site that gives you a comprehensive picture of what's on the site. Then in the upper right, or they put it beneath it, but on the right side, and in slightly smaller text is the utility navigation. The utilities are things that help you use the site, but they're not the reason you come to the site in the first place. So like contact us. I mean, that might be why you're there, but it's not like what the site's about. It helps you use the site, interact with the people. Weekly ad, just useful stuff. Cart, stuff that helps you use the site goes in the utility navigation. Slightly smaller text to indicate prioritization and hierarchy. Like, yeah, this is easy to find, but this isn't the main thing the site's about. The site's about this, the main navigation. So you see that across the top. And then local navigation. So within each section of the site, you need to provide good local navigation to people, which shows the subsections within that section. So here at Target, so I'm in, okay, now they've got a usability fail already here because I don't know what section I'm in. I can tell from here the name, that's good, but they should have highlighted it up there so that I know I'm in home. You need to have an indicator in the navigation showing which section the person is in, okay? So I'm in home, and then along here, this is the stuff I can do in home, the stuff I can look at. These are the main categories. Bath, bedding, home appliances, home decor, storage and organization. This is well organized, and I'll show you why in a little bit. But this is well organized. Global navigation, local navigation. A mistake sometimes people make, yeah, go ahead.
What do you think about drop downs in the main the global navigation?
Yeah, as an accessory, I think it can be okay. I had to think about this for a while. So 4 years ago, I would have said, no, I don't think it's a good idea, because there's a principle, the smallest effective difference. That's a key usability principle. It comes from Edward Tufte, who's a master on information design. So like if you're making a chart, for example, the most important part of that chart is the information, not the grid lines. So make the grid lines subtle, dotted lines, not sharp, bold lines, because the person isn't there to see the lines. The lines get in the way. So smallest effective difference. And I would say 4 years ago, I would have said when there's a pop-up there and you can, when you scroll over something on the global navigation, it shows you there, it might provide a little bit of help, but it also interferes a bit and doesn't accord with the smallest effective difference. However, since then it has become more of a convention, more and more, and sites have learned how to do it better. And I'll show you the Desiring God site, how they do it. And so now I think it's useful if done right, but you shouldn't have to rely on it. It's not enough if someone only does that on their site. It doesn't also within the section have the actual local navigation on the side, left or right, then it's not sufficient. Only as an accessory can it be useful. Okay. Oh, here's a mistake some people make. So at Desiring God, we have a sister ministry that creates children's curriculum, Children Desiring God. And they do a great job, but they wanted to have a lot of prominence on our site, and that's totally understandable. And they would say to us things like, can there be a link to us in your local navigation in this one section, in About Us? And I had to say no. This is why another reason usability problems happen a lot, by the way. It's because of internal politics. I don't mean that necessarily in a negative sense, but this department's thinking about themselves, this department's thinking about themselves, the CEO thinks he knows everything. And no one's thinking first of the user and the organization as a whole. So I had to say no to him, and they listened to me, fortunately. And maybe I'm just more willing to frustrate people sometimes. But I said no because it's bad usability, and it's going to confuse the user. When there's an off-site link in the local navigation, it's confusing because the local navigation is there to show you what's in this section. It's not to feature things. It's not to feature things. It's to show what is in that section. It's to orient people. Target is on the edge because now they have related links beneath here. It almost gives the appearance that it's local, part of the local navigation. I wouldn't do it that way. There is a place to have related links, to be sure. I just would do this a little bit differently. Okay, so global navigation and local navigation. And I just talked about the local navigation. Okay, now, Target gets a bit confusing And here's why. Okay, so let me go back. Here I'm at home, and we've noticed they didn't highlight it up in the global navigation like they should, but they did have a page name. That's good. Okay, so now if I'm gonna click on one of these though, I'm lost. Immediately I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Like maybe I'm like more stupid than most people, but on every website, I look at it like I don't know anything. Like that's just the grid through which I operate with every website. How would I use this if I knew almost nothing? Or if I was 5 years old or something, and like immediately I'm lost. I don't know where I am. Even though there's a page name, Home Appliances, I don't know where this page exists in the hierarchy of the global and local navigation. I'm disoriented now. Now, okay, I sit back. Within a second, I realize where I am because I just clicked on Home Appliances in the local navigation. So I know I'm in the Home Appliances section. I'm still in the Home overall global section. But notice I'm having to think now. And I can't offload my memory. So, and I'll show you how the local navigation could represent this. But if they had represented where I am better in the local navigation, I wouldn't have to keep it in my mind where I'm at. And I would have more mental bandwidth to devote to actually using the site rather than remembering where I am. Does this make sense? We've been talking a lot about offloading your memory. So like you don't have to memorize people's phone numbers anymore because you just click on their name in your phone. You're offloading your memory. That's a good thing. Einstein even said, apparently, allegedly, like he didn't even know his own phone number back 60 years ago or whatever. He said, I make it a point never to learn something I don't need to know. And he can always look it up. And that's Einstein. And yeah, I think back then he probably should have had his phone number memorized. But the point is, whenever you can offload your cognitive workload, that's a good thing. And you can do that for people on your sites by providing good orientation. And most sites start dropping the ball. A lot of times they will have global navigation, but they start to drop the ball when they get into the local navigation. And then when you get 3 levels deep into the site, usually everything falls apart. Yeah?
What about, kind of the page orientation? This is Target Home Appliances, which a lot of people default that say, oh, that's where they are. It says Target Home Appliances.
Great, it's a fantastic question to raise. So the question is, what about right here, can't you tell, and isn't this enough? And the answer is this is helpful, this is like a breadcrumb. It's an accessory, it's not sufficient. And the reason is, it just doesn't connect immediately. What would connect is, okay, so I clicked on, I can't even remember what page that was. Okay, Home Appliances. Okay, so I clicked on Home Appliances right here. What should happen is, so when I get in there, it should still say Home Appliances. So the main sections of the site should still be there. Then underneath Home Appliances, I should see the sections within Home Appliances. And then I know right where I am in the hierarchy, like a tree. That's what should be done. As it is, now I got to think. That's immediately obvious. It minimizes question marks. You don't have to think. This, someone can say, well, you can figure out where you are. Yes, you can. But remember the principle is don't make me think. You got to think hard to figure. This is horrible. All Target's website should be taken down. Just kidding. This is an elementary mistake made by a major corporation. There is no excuse for this. Absolutely no excuse. Target is in my hometown. I'm from Minneapolis. That's where they are. They got their corporate headquarters there. They're making a basic elementary mistake. And a lot of times, this is justified by, well, it doesn't do harm. People can figure it out. Yeah, right, but go the extra mile for them. It's not, they can figure it out, but don't make them think.
This is because the marketing people yell louder than the programmers.
Exactly.
And they want to have all these pictures and get ads in your face.
Yep, that's exactly right. There's all these competing priorities going on, and that's why the only solution there, and those are all good priorities, but you literally have to prioritize them, and the user comes first. That's the way it goes. The user has to win. Because businesses are not in existence for themselves, but for the user, for the customer. The business exists for the customer. That's why the customer has to come first. And that's why I spent the time I did in the first part showing that's not just good business practice, it's biblical. So I would do this even if it didn't result in more money. I'd still do it this way because it's better for people. I would argue, though, it's going to result in more money and profit for Target because people can use their site better and it's a more pleasant experience. So I would say in the long run, it is going to benefit them financially, but I don't care. I'd do it anyway because people come first. Okay, so horrible. I just want to get rid of this site. Elementary mistake. So Target gets confusing, and that's how. So desiring God, here's what I want to show you. I'll go there in a little bit. So I'm not using this like to say, hey, desiring God is the best site, but we built it on the basis of these principles. So it's still a place to go to see these modeled and how they work out. So you'll notice the global navigation at the top, home, resource library, blog, store, events, about us. That's what you can do at the site. You see it in a glance. You see the tagline, God-centered resources from the ministry of John Piper. You know what this site is, what it does. You see the utility navigation in the upper right. You see the ability to change language in the upper right. That's great. You see the ability to search. Oh, by the way, some people say, oh, people can search. So providing good navigation isn't as important because people can just search. And sometimes people think that search is navigation. When talking about navigation, they actually talk about searching. And now listen, search is not navigation. Search is a helpful way of finding what's on a site, but it's not the only way. And by itself, it's not sufficient. Some people are search dominant users. So they go and they immediately search. There are people like that. And those type of people will say, who cares about the navigation? I'm just going to search for what I want. More power to you, go for it. You want to use the site, that way that's fantastic, and it's easy, because look, search, right there. But others are browser dominant users. And we can't forget about them. The search dominant user a lot of times tends to forget about the browser dominant user. And it's about half and half. Actually, I think more people are browse dominant than search dominant. But this again comes back to conform to how people actually operate, not how you think they should. So I know some people that are search dominant, and they're like, people should just use search. It's better for them. Look, maybe it is better. I would argue it isn't, but that's not the point. Conform to how people actually use the web, not how you want them to, not how you think they should. Ditch this parental approach. Yeah?
Wouldn't you say that search is really necessary because of bad web design?
Well, I would say that, yeah. I agree. Yeah. Yes, it is. It's necessary because of bad web design. Now, there are times where it's useful for other reasons because you know right what you want. Search is best for known items. You know exactly what you're looking for, search works great. When you don't know exactly what you're looking for, search, not so great. And I would argue it's a good thing, and most people like being exposed to new things that they wouldn't have been exposed to. If you rely just on search, people are limited to only what's already in their head. What the minds, the terminology, phrases that's already in their head, they're locked into that. The ability to browse your site easily, they're exposed to a new world, new ways of thinking of things. We, at the Desiring God website, one of the things we believed is our navigation is a way of teaching. We're making a theological statement in how the site is organized because we're telling people what the content is, how to think of the content. A sermon is different from an article, different from a book. These differences matter. How to think structurally about the content was one of the things we wanted to do for the users, show them how to use that. So good navigation is actually a form of teaching. And this is where, leadership comes into play. Is the user always right? I was joking around with Drew Goodmanson yesterday. And he was saying, no, the user's not always right. And he's right about that. He is right about that. The thing is, we try and correct the user a lot of times in areas where we shouldn't, where areas that it is literally a matter of preference. Where the user's not right, here's where it comes, Prior to user-centeredness is content-centeredness. You need to accurately reflect the nature of your content. And if someone were to come to the Desiring God site and say, look, 90% of the world is search dominant now. No one cares about navigation. I'd say, I don't care. I got something I want to show about our content. I want to show how it all connects and how it lays out, because that itself is part of our content and teaches something about how to think of these subjects, and people need to think about these things in that way. But notice This isn't coming from selfishness. This isn't coming from a parental approach where I'm like, well, I'm okay with it like this, so everybody else should be too. That's not it. It's driven by the content. This is what the content deserves. The content is primary. It's not only the most important thing on the site, but determines how you arrange your site. So I'm not taking a parental approach to the users. I'm going to the content and saying the content demands this. Content takes priority over user if there is a conflict. Notice I'm not saying marketing takes priority over users. The content, what you're trying to say, this is not chosen. It's intrinsic to your message. Okay? So content-centered before user-centered, but most of the time we're just not user-centered, and we're not making that. And actually it is user-centered to be content-centered because it serves the user to present the content the way it ought to be presented. Okay? Other things. Okay, so here's the local navigation, and notice we separated this out in different types of categories. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit, but notice what we did differently from Target. So you see the resource categories here: sermons, conference messages, articles, online books. If you click into online books, this doesn't go away. That's disorienting. When navigation disappears, disorienting. It needs to be persistent. People need to always know it's there. It needs to be stable. They need to be able to count on it. So the rest stays, and this gets revealed as being underneath online books. So the user at a glance knows where they are in the hierarchy. They can offload their orientation to the site itself, so they don't have to think so hard about that. Now they can focus on what book they want and where they want to go next. Not, how do I get there again? Because I can't remember which page I came from. Do I have to click the back arrow if I want to go to something I liked on that page? Instead, like at Target, like you got to remember what page you came from, hit the back arrow. Here, they just realize, okay, yeah, I'm in online books by date. So before this, I was on the online books page. I'll just click there to get back. Just, simple, 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 simple. You'll notice we have the categories grouped into categories because there are different types of categories. It's like one time when we started the site, I'll get to that in a sec. I've got a slide for that. So you'll notice global navigation, local navigation, it's persistent, it's always there, the user can count on it. Yeah?
Well, I see at the top you have resource library highlighted.
Yes.
Shouldn't over on the side online books also be highlighted?
You're absolutely right. It should be highlighted. It is, but it is too faint to be, it's not showing up in my, but you're absolutely right. Yes, it should be highlighted. And I don't know if the faintness is because of the image transfer or if it's actually that faint on the site. If it's that faint on the site, they need to make it bolder. Because it needs to be, you don't need to be like, is this highlighted? It needs to be clear. Some people might say, well, I don't like the way that looks when navigation's highlighted. I just say tough. Because usability is the higher priority than looks. That's the way it is. The navigation must be well organized on the basis of sound principles of classification. Okay, so that's the next thing. It's not enough just to create the navigation. You need to do it right. And you need to do it on the basis of sound principles of classification. And that's the second principle. Know how to categorize well. And I have a document I'm going to hand out to you. So like when I was doing the Designer God website and doing the information architecture for that, I did not know how to categorize things. Like I had a basic knowledge and I'd categorized lots of things before, but never like a whole website. So I had to learn how to do it. And there was almost nothing out there. I paid $80 for a course on a library science, an online course on library science. I read about filing. I searched everywhere I possibly could to find out about classification. There was almost nothing out there, but some lady, bless her heart, put online a course in library science, and that just helped me a lot. And then I read some stuff in information architecture books, and then stuff I know just about like how theology has been categorized over the centuries. That's important and that's easy. But how do you translate all this to websites? Anyway, you need to know actually how to categorize things. So if you just sit down and say, okay, I'm going to categorize this, you're probably going to do it wrong. Like, learn what you're doing. Don't just do it. You got to learn. And so that's when there's one site someone said to me, we've got an information architect working on our site, so it's going to be good. I'm like, I don't know if it's going to be good because I don't know if they know what they're doing. Some people, they just think, oh, I'm an information architect, and they don't even know anything about information architecture. They think they do, but they haven't educated themselves about the principles. Like, it's not just about having someone with the right external credentials. They need to know what they're doing, and you can know what you're doing. Okay, so these are a few principles of sound classification. The organizing schemes need to be consistent. For example, you don't mix topics with resource categories. So for example, a bad list of categories would go something like sanctification, doctrine of sin, sermons, book of Romans. Horrible. Because those are different types of categories. There's more than one type of category. Okay, so some of those are topics. Sanctification, doctrine of sin. Those are topics. Book of Romans, it's a scripture text. That's a different way of browsing the content. And sermons, that's a resource type, not a category. And you need to bring those out. You need to distinguish those. And that's why we did that in our navigation here. Another type of category is a highlight category. So what's most popular? Notice that's why we have these bold things here. We've categorized our categories. If it just went essential resources recently added, most popular, sermons, conference messages, without the distinctions, what goes into the user's mind is blah. Like, they don't know this. I'm not saying users are like, oh, different types of categories. They don't know what the problem is most of the time. But your mind just says, what? So you do this for them. You do that processing for them. Pre-process the page for people. Categories should be mutually exclusive as much as possible. Otherwise, you're like, which one should I go into? This one or that one? It fits in both. You got to make them mutually exclusive. And a lot of people solve this problem by putting things in like every category. So like you go from category to category and it's always the same stuff. That's annoying, not usable, because each time the user has to say to himself, what's unique here? What's here that I didn't see before? But the motivation behind that is the marketing people, whoever is like, we want to make sure people find this, so let's put it everywhere. Just bad. Not thinking well about categorization. Cross-listing should be kept at a minimum. Categories should be comprehensive, no gaps. They should anticipate future content. Groups of similar choices should be limited to 5 or 9 items when possible, because that's the limit of our short-term memory. Accord with how people actually operate and how they are designed to operate. That's another reason we grouped our categories. Otherwise, the list would be more than people can take into their short-term memory and thus use. There should be no redundancy in the labels, sections, and categories. And this isn't on here, but labels should not be cute or clever. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. What doesn't fit? I talked about this. Okay, so tell me what doesn't fit here. Yeah, Romans does not fit. What else doesn't fit? Easter sermons. So what most people do when they're designing a website, they're like, hey, look, we're 3 levels deep in the site anyway. I don't know what to do with Easter sermons. It's a category we want to have. I don't know how it fits, but I'm just sticking it in that list. That's called laziness. Don't be lazy. Think it through. And if you can't figure it out, get help. Read books, talk to people. Here's a better way to organize those same categories. Grouping them into the types of categories they are. So by topic, by text, by occasion. And then this could go down like funeral sermons, wedding sermons, Christmas sermons. Cool. Or by text, Romans, Matthew, Mark, Revelation. Just works great. Easy, 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 easy. The third principle, labels. Make labels clear and consistent, not cute and clever, because cute and clever labels make you think. It might add to the experience, but it increases your cognitive workload because you have to say, what is here? Cute and clever labels make you think. Don't use them. So, what did I just say? What's the principle? Should
labels concise and clear, not
That's right.
cute and
Yep.
clever.
Should labels be cute and clever?
No.
No. Good answer. I'm going to show you some cute and clever labels. Here's one example. Like the search on your page, call it search, not search-o-rama. Okay? Search-o-rama, bad. Now you might say, oh, people will get it, and it conveys to the mystique we're trying to communicate through the site. It doesn't matter because it adds their cognitive workload. The way their mind works is search-o-rama. Let's see, what's that mean? Oh, that must mean search. Okay, that's where I go to search. Just call it search. Yeah?
Cutesy titles mess up your SEO.
Oh, and they mess up your SEO. Great point. So yeah, it's going to be harder to find your site when people search for it. Excellent point. The fifth principle, page names. Every page needs to have a name, and you need to make the name match what the user clicked to get there. This is another thing that makes people think. If the page is called this, they click on it, in the link it's called something, they click on it, and the name of the page is something else, they have to think because they have to say to themselves, Okay. Are those the same? Are those identical? And then their mind concludes, yep, it's identical. But they had to think about that rather than it being obvious and self-evident. By the way, every page does need to have a name, and I'm going to show you one way people try and get around this, which is not good. They use breadcrumbs to double as the page name because they say, well, look, the name of the page is showing up all over the place then, because if you have breadcrumbs, you see the name there, then you see it in the actual page name, and maybe in the navigation too. So like, oh, you see it 3 times. That's right. That's needed to orient people. Don't take it up with me. That's how God designed us. I didn't design the human race. I didn't do this. These are principles of how human nature is, how we operate. If someone can come up with a better way to provide orientation without the redundancy, for example, the page name, great. No one's figured it out yet. Why do so many websites frustrate their users? That's the guiding question I started with. It's because they ignore these simple principles. Here's what I want to do. I'm going to get out of this, and I want to just show you a couple things. Okay. The most important thing is that, okay, they have this here. So now I click into Home Appliances. And, oh, that's good. They don't make the mistake. Okay. So in the breadcrumbs, Target Home Appliances, some people say, oh, we don't need to have the page name. This is the page name right here. They say we don't need to have that because people can tell from the breadcrumb, and it's just not the way it works. So if Target said no page name, the breadcrumb doubles as the page name, that's a usability fail. They don't make that mistake, and I'm glad. Okay, here's what I want to do. First, I'm going to pick on my blog. This is my blog. And there are usability mistakes on this because I don't have the time or knowledge to fix them. Yeah?
Question, what if there's too many links on a page?
Yeah.
Like you saw with that big drop down.
Right.
It just seems like you're going to be thinking a lot of, okay, where do I want to click? What do I want to click?
Right.
Is that an issue?
It can be. So what you want to do is group the links into categories of 5 to 9. That helps users. If there's a way not to have so many links, that's great. But if they need to be there for some reason, then you just have a trade-off going on. And you need to do your best. And a way to help people is group them into categories of 5 to 9. If someone says, okay, here's another principle. It needs to be obvious if something's a link. It means links need to be a distinct color. And nothing that is not a link can be the color that a link is. Otherwise, the person's confused. Okay? Someone might say, yeah, but if we follow that principle everywhere, some pages are going to be like all blue, all red. I know. That's the way it has to be. I mean, yeah, it might be better if that is a lot of red. But this isn't about perfection. You can't come to a perfect solution. It's about making the right trade-offs. So again, with the priority of usability means you put up with it. There's a lot of red on the page.
Biola University offers a variety of biblically centered degree programs, ranging from business to ministry to the arts and sciences. Visit biola.edu to find out how Biola could make a difference in your life.